for those who can't get in. Okay, so this is our second study session for our second exam. This is our social problems class, by the way. So if you've logged in for my office hours, that's not what we're doing right now. Probably everyone is here for that study session though. Let me just get all of my windows right where I want them to be so I can actually be as efficient as I can. Okay. The exam itself is, if I remember correctly, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 questions with one essay question. It is a pretty darn short exam, as is reflected on the study guide. If you haven't reviewed your study guide yet, now is a very good time to pull that file up. Honestly, when I was making and looking over the study guide, this test should probably be split up and put into exam 1 and exam 3. There probably shouldn't be a second exam, but that's just the reality we're in. So just because when you're looking at that exam 2 study guide, don't think that there's a whole lot that's on the test that's not here. Honestly, it's just a pretty short test, quite frankly. So with that said, which of those terms do you have questions about? And those of you who came in a smidge later, if you could turn on your cameras, that would be super helpful for us. Explain Title IX. Yeah, I can explain Title IX. So can anyone tell me what you know about Title IX? What would anyone chime in and just tell the group about Title IX?
It has to do with discrimination in education.
For who? What group?
I'm going to assume women.
Yes. Yes. Women. Most of us know Title IX as it relates to sports somehow, right? That's how most people know anything about Title IX. The reality of the matter is that Title IX is a whole lot more than just sports. Title IX makes it so that men and women cannot be treated differently in an educational setting, where like you can't, for example, make boys take shop class and girls take home ec class, right? You can't make those kinds of weird divisions. That is a big difference there. But the reality of the matter is that Title IX ties in with educational opportunities. And the reason why Title IX is tied so closely to sports is because so much educational money is tied in with sports. So the greater relevance is that it's not about just having a boys football team and a girls football team. It's about educational opportunities for both men and women. That's the big thing that I want you to get about Title IX, is that element of it, that it's more than just softball teams and football teams. Any other questions?
Can we go over the out of the closet strategy and Oscar Wilde?
And what's the other thing?
Oscar Wilde.
Yeah, sure. Two big gay things. So Oscar Wilde was a, best way to put it, a very notable author in the 1800s. There were a number of authors during this period that were suspected to be gay. Oscar Wilde was pretty openly gay, The only times he actually really denied it was because it was illegal and punishable with prison in England at that time. He was an Englishman in that time to be gay, so you could be put in prison for it. But he was really super notable in that he was pretty obviously and openly gay. And the fact of the matter is, why that's even relevant is because Oscar Wilde being there and being in the relevance of the society as it was indicates that the LGBT rights movement is way, way older than most people perceive it to be. And then that ties in with the Mattachine Society. The Mattachine Society was a a semi-secret organization dedicated to protecting, mostly legally, the rights of specifically gay men. And the Mattachine Society's heyday was from about the 1930s to about the 1960s. The Out of the Closet strategy. This really came into being in the mid 1990s, which, and if you look into literature, if you look in books or anything, they didn't really talk about, nobody talked about gay people as, quote, being in the closet prior to the 1990s. The whole point of the Out of the Closet strategy was to point out to people, hey, you totally know gay people. They are real, they exist. You probably have a gay cousin. They are real people in our society. Prior to that moment in time, it was super, super duper common for gay couples to live together saying, oh, that's my brother, that's my cousin, that's my roommate, wherever. And they would hide their sexuality. And there would be people who go to church with these two people for like decades and never know that they were gay. It's like, no, that's her sister. Like, well, actually not. So the Out of the Closet strategy, I never actually got to answering that question, was a political strategy that was taken by the LGBT rights community in the mid 1990s for everyone who was gay to actively encourage them to come out, whether it was beneficial to them or not, to make it obvious that gay people existed. That's the short answer to that. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Any other questions?
You mentioned the Mattachine Society when we were going over Oscar Wilde. So what would the test be like, kind of hinting at, or like the main purpose of the Mattachine Society?
The main purpose, I mean, they actually did a whole lot more. The main purpose of the Mattachine Society was to defend gay men. And that's another thing to just drive home that message of the LGBT rights movement is more than just something that just happened in the last 15 years. Anything else?
Can we talk about what we need to know about prejudice?
About prejudice?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me look at the study guide. So what you need to know about prejudice is the dynamic between prejudice and discrimination and the difference between those two things. Prejudice is a thought process. Prejudice is the ideas we have about groups of people and all of those things we typically call racism and all that, and sexism and all that stuff. That's prejudice, and it's in our brains, right? Discrimination is action, it's behavior, it's how we treat people. That's discrimination. And prejudice is, discrimination is typically rooted in prejudice. It is possible to have prejudice and not discriminate, right? You can hypothetically, I hope you're not, be a racist person and not actually treat people differently in any way because, well, quite frankly, in our society, you know that's not okay. It's not socially acceptable, racism, right? It happens, but it's not socially acceptable. So there are plenty of prejudiced people walking around, I know some of them, that don't discriminate. On the other hand, there are many instances where people are not actively prejudiced that they then accidentally discriminate. You can, if say, for example, you run a grocery store and to get into the grocery store, you have to go up several steps. That is actively then discriminating against people who are in wheelchairs to be able to get into the grocery store, right? That's not probably an active intentional thing that people did, but it has the actual ramifications of discriminating against people who are handicapped. Does that make sense? Any further questions on those? No? Okay. Anything else?
Could we just go over the main differences between the different waves of feminism?
Yes, absolutely. First wave when feminism has three waves: first wave, second wave, and third wave feminism. The first wave of feminism was the suffragist movement. There were a bunch of things tied in with first wave feminism, but the biggest thing to first wave feminism was getting women the right to vote. And I'm not going to go into all the other smaller details. I'm just giving you the big chunks of the three waves, and this is what you need to know. And the first wave of feminism occurred in the early 1800s. The second wave of feminism went from about 1960 to about 1980. In this wave of feminism, women got the right to, as is tied in with Title IX, full education, equal access to employment. Equal access to employment and education were the big thing with second wave feminism. It was the concept of any job a man can do, a woman can also do that job. There isn't that big of a difference between the strength of a man and a woman, especially as is relevant in actually doing a job. That's the concept of second wave feminism. Now, second wave feminism had a distinct tendency to be very abrasive and to make people angry and not really care that they were making people angry. So when people say that they hate feminism, they're usually talking about second wave feminism because they don't understand third wave feminism. Third wave feminism then, which came into being in the early 1990s and it continues to this day, is about, have we discussed intersectionality in any of our materials for this course yet? I don't think so. Did we? Danielle, can you tell me? No? Yeah, okay.
Well, we learned about the intersex, but like the biological part of it.
No, not it doesn't have anything to do with being intersex. So I know
Oh, intersectional, where it's like a bunch of things go into the feminism, like race and stuff.
Yeah, did we talk about that?
I don't think so.
Okay, it doesn't matter. The big thing with third wave feminism is the concept that men and women have the right to be as masculine or feminine or somewhere in between as they are. That's the third wave feminism concept. The big difference between second wave feminism and third wave feminism is that in second wave feminism, women were actively encouraged to not be traditionally feminine because it was seen as being a way of being oppressed by the patriarchy. in third wave feminism, women are actively encouraged to work their construction job and then take care of their kids and then go out dancing, being real sexy later in the evening, right? Being whoever you are, whenever you are through the whole day. And the same applies for men too. If a man has his construction job and then wants to go out dancing real sexy in a women's dress, that man has that right under third wave feminism. Do those three distinctions make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Yeah, good. A lot of people in our society don't understand the difference between second and third wave feminism, and it leads to a lot of intensely stupid statements about feminism that aren't even close. Anything else?
Can you talk about the profile of an abusive spouse? Because I didn't think there was a profile. I was pretty sure it wasn't, but I could be
There
wrong.
is. So, and that's a little bit tricky. So spousal abuse, both spousal abuse and alcoholism, actually, and domestic abuse, they can be found in every mode of life among everyone, right? It happens in every community. But there is a specific type of individual that is most likely to commit domestic abuse. Specifically, be an abusive spouse. That is a young male who is socially isolated. So, and almost typically, these people who are at high risk for being abusers, they are like in their early 20s, maybe even teens, right? They're in their first marriage. They got married very, very young, and effectively, they don't know how to cope with the situation. They were never taught how to deal with the situation. They're socially isolated and unable to actually deal with this new situation they're in. And often they're also relatively uneducated, so they're not really aware of those other ways of being. They're not aware that they shouldn't be hitting their spouse. That's what, and that also somewhat applies to child abuse too. And this is what nuance is all about, right? Domestic abuse happens to everyone. Well, not everyone. It can happen to anyone in any demographic. But if you are young, male, and you're socially isolated, those are major risk factors. That all makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good.
Also, too, can we just, pretty sure I have it right, but for the types of abuse, children, it's usually more like physical abuse and neglect. And then elder abuse, isn't it more like fraud or like money, like they abuse their power?
Yeah. So both children and the elderly can be victims of neglect, particularly super small children and the elderly who have fallen into dementia, right? Elderly that can't take care of themselves anymore. So there's that element of it. And then you're right, with the elderly, they may be in legal possession of money and other things of value. And then the presumed inheritors feel that, well, that old coot isn't taking care of the stuff anymore. It's actually my money anyway, so I'm going to use it, right? That is a major point of exploitation of the elderly. Yes, you're correct. Anything else?
For talking about the profile of the abusive spouse, I think in your PowerPoint slide, it's mentioned something about how women and females are actually more likely to be abusive, but less serious assault. Is that true?
Yes. So Yes. So I think if I remember correctly as well, women in abusive, dangerous situations may be more likely to actually abuse children as well. And because, again, that social isolation is really an element there. And women are more likely to be put in that socially isolated, you can only be a housewife situation than men are likely to be put into. But then in the dangerousness of the situation, it is a matter of physical force, and it is a matter of men can be much more aggressive and physically violent. But with all of that said, if by chance you're in a situation like this, if someone lives in your same house and knows where you sleep, it's intensely dangerous. Yeah. Anything else? Do we know what I'm getting at when I mention AIDS? How is AIDS relevant in the, John?
Oh, I was about to say, I was kind of wondering about that, what you meant when you put AIDS in the study guide.
Yeah. So AIDS, and this is the kind of thing that if you weren't alive during the 1990s and especially the 80s, you might not necessarily put this together. AIDS was a big, big deal in the gay community. The 80s is sometimes called the gay plague era of the LGBT movement. Thousands of gay men died very, very quickly. In the early 1980s, AIDS could kill you within 9 months. It was incredibly fast acting because we didn't have retrovirals. We didn't have the things we have today that help people live like meaningful lives with AIDS and even prevent HIV from becoming AIDS. So that was and it's a horrible systemic thing, but the hit of AIDS to the LGBT community really strengthened and reinforced that community, especially among gay men, that they needed to do what they had to do as a matter of survival to create this movement to really punch into like common everyday life of full acceptance. And that's really what we need, what I wanted to incorporate with that. It's not just that AIDS is a dangerous disease, it's that it has special significance to the LGBT community.
So basically, it has significance to gay men for unity and coming together, kind of.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, it was, and specifically in the 1980s. AIDS was a political issue in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan refused to put any federal funding toward researching AIDS for years and years because it was seen as being a gay issue. Originally in the United States, AIDS was known as gay-related immunodisease, I believe is the abbreviation that was used. So it was actually like in the name that was used for a while. It was a big, big deal. Yeah. Other questions?
Okay, so since the AIDS, like the crisis happened around the 1980s and then the out of closet movement happened in the 1990s, is there, like, this is just pure curiosity wanting to know this, but is there a way that could connect, like, because of the lack of like healthcare benefits to the AIDS crisis, the LGBTQ movement pushed towards like almost social normalizing being gay to be able to get help with the AIDS crisis going on, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. No, yeah, you're spot on. That's what happened. It was a driver because gay men effectively were invisible especially if you are in rural areas that don't really have a really large gay population. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Really tragic era in LGBT history. Yeah. Yeah, any other questions? What about that bit about secondary incarceration?
So
Do you have
that
any
plays.
questions?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No.
I would say, doesn't that just place a big toll, make the lives more difficult of your loved ones? It can stress them out. They may have to change careers, may have to change locations, and then it can impact your community as well.
Yes, and which communities are most likely to be impacted by secondary incarceration?
Like which demographic?
Yeah.
I would say probably the Black communities
Yes,
because
absolutely.
they have higher rates of incarceration.
That's right. Yeah, African American communities are absolutely disproportionately impacted by secondary incarceration. It has to do with the earnings in households, absence of fathers and sometimes mothers because they're in prison. So you have kids growing up without fathers because they're taken away by the state. You have community organizations, you have churches, you have those groups and communities that don't have that person in it, right? And that also plays a part in secondary incarceration. Yeah, yeah. So that's a big portion of it. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Do we feel comfortable?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Gonna say last call. Anyone else? No? Okay, well, I've had a really long day and things have sucked over here pretty bad. If anyone doesn't have any final questions, I think we're good to go. Just be sure to get everything submitted by Sunday night. And if you run into tech issues, please let me know. I think the exam is working. I think everything's operating properly, but if you run into something, just let me know about that as soon as possible. Okay, I am good with this little session we had. And if you need to see this again, I am gonna try to get this up sometime this evening. Okay, see you guys later.